Hella Hella Bridge near Richmond in Natal came alive again at the start of this year's Hansa Canoe Marathon on the Umkomaas River. More than 300 canoes, comprising both single-seater K1s and double-seater K2s, were entered into what has been billed as the country's greatest long-distance rough water race. Final preparations were completed as competitors made their way to the riverbank to be set off in batches so that a bottleneck was not caused in the early rapids. Spectators crowded the bridge for the best view. The level of the river was much lower than expected, and that the paddlers knew would tax their strength and skill to the utmost limits. All the big guns were there. Among them were Tony Scott, Oscar Chalupsky, Colin Simpkins, John Edmonds and Rory Pennyfather. Doozy winners Graham Pope Ellis and Tim Cornish had burnt themselves out in a triathlon and withdrew their entry. Soon after the start is possibly the trickiest rapid on this section of the river, and it proved to be very spectacular. No sooner were they through the first rapids when these huge rocks warned the paddlers that they were about to enter the potentially dangerous rapid known affectionately as Robbie's Special. Many Springbok paddlers have been unseated here and been faced with a long walk out of the valley, their boats broken. Durban's Tony Scott and Malcolm Hall were not daunted by it, however, and were busy establishing an early lead, with Colin Simpkins and Richard Starr, also from Durban, close behind. Wits paddlers, Mark Perrow and Neil Evans, were also up front. Oscar Chalupsky and Mike Tocknell found the pace too much for them in the low water conditions. Chalupsky was the defending champion, although last year he paddled with Matt Carlisle, who recently returned from a European trip, unfit for the testing river. The colourful scene was enjoyed by the local inhabitants, who are always there on the race day as Robbie's Special takes its toll. Wise take an easier, if not quicker, route over the rocks. Vernon Starr told us what happened to him and teammate Vernon Jacobs after they decided on the quicker route.
Well, we came down the first section okay, and then we got caught in the rocks over there, and the boat spun around. We fell out, and then just got caught in the rock and was gone. That's it.
What do you do in this situation to salvage your equipment?
Well, you try and get as much stuff out as possible. For example, the seats, seat pins, pedals, everything you can get out. We got our Lendl pump out, which is the main thing in the boat, and we tried to get our pedals out, but we didn't have a pair of pliers, so we couldn't get anything out other than that.
And how do you get out from here?
Well, either we've got to walk or try and get a lift with some of the officials if there are any around.
There were no officials around. Easy access assures plenty of spectators and press photographers at the rapid known as number 8, with Tony Scott and Malcolm Hall holding on to their lead. No time for Andre Harden to appreciate the peaceful valley, as all concentration is needed to stay upright. For some, it is time to effect emergency repairs with anything that comes to hand.
Philip, we didn't have an airbag yet, we would have lost the nose.
Didn't have?
The scenic St. Josephine Bridge is the last accessible spot for family and friends on the first day, with Scott and Hall still leading the pack. A dam has been proposed downstream to supply future water needs, or an alternative scheme to pipe water over the Impenla Hills to Midmar Dam. Let's hope there's some other solution so that this fine stretch of wild water, first paddled by conservationist Ian Player and Fred Schmidt in the 50s, will no longer be threatened. With the overnight stop not far off, Starr and Simpkins turn on the power in an attempt to pull ahead of Scott and Hall. Transvaal doubles combinations of Mark Perrow and Neil Evans, as well as Brian Longley and John Smuts, stayed with the leaders on day one. Sisters Marlene Boshoff and Jenny Bentel proving once again that the fairer sex will not be left behind in the kitchen. The finish banner, a welcome sight to the paddle-weary warriors with the promise of sustenance and rest. Colin Simpkins and Richard Starr came home ahead of Tony Scott and Malcolm Hall, with Perrow and Evans third and Longley and Smuts fourth. Seasoned campaigner Tony Scott reflects on the water conditions.
Very low. That's the main thing. That's why it's taken 4:45 as against 4 hours last year. It's a lot lower, so that's 18 inches lower than last year.
It appeared to us that you weren't really pushing all that hard. Not you particularly, but the leaders.
Yeah, the pace was reasonably slow compared to normal years, but I think everyone was a bit anxious about the distance, catching up on them. So I think the pace was slow from the beginning.
What happens tomorrow?
Well, you see, I don't think it would be wise for Scotty to drop us at the start, or to try and drop us at the start, because of these guys. These two Transvaal crews are relatively fit, even though the pace was quite slow today. I think he'll be happy to have us around at least for the first couple of hours to give him a hand, and then he's probably going to try and get rid of us. We'll see if we can hang in there.
Oscar Chalupsky and Mike Tocknell finished 17 minutes behind the leaders. The first singles home were Stanley Fryman from Wits and Herman Chalupsky with pre-race favourite Chris Grief of Defence in 5th position. After a brief rest, it was time to repair those cracks and holes that seemed to appear as if from nowhere, and all this in order to accept the challenge of another day on the water. There would be those who would not be able to accept the challenge, and the carcasses of their craft lay discarded in the Umkomaas Valley, broken beyond repair, like unwanted toys. Back at the camp, it was time to eat and talk about the day's experiences. This is all a part of the magic and camaraderie of a river race. Dawn greeted the paddlers with an overcast sky. It was time to pull wet clothes onto a bruised but rested body and carry your boat to the river for the final onslaught. Those paddlers who finished the first day 1 hour or more behind the leaders were sent on their way first in an attempt by the organizers to have a tighter finish at the coast.
5 minutes for the second boat.
The leaders were then released according to the time difference of the first day. With muscles hardly warm, the first obstacle was ahead. It is known as the 4-foot drop to the paddlers and provided a good soaking to clear the cobwebs and wake up those still dreaming of a warm bed. Herman Chalupsky decided to take a safer route past the 4-foot drop. Tony Scott and Malcolm Hall made it look easy. Unlike some unlucky paddlers for whom the 4-foot drop proved too much.
We were just coming through and actually shot it, but the back of the boat's a bit weak, and I came right out backwards and it just snapped the back.
What happens now?
We go back, end of the race.
What does a boat like this cost you?
We got this one for 400 Rand from Richard Starr, actually leading the race.
And still with Richard Starr and Colin Simpkins, Tony Scott and Malcolm Hall, with the Transvaal paddlers Mike Perrow and Neil Evans giving them no quarter. The river courses through the Umkomaas Rapids, a popular spot for the spectators on the second day, as the road here runs next to the river. Tony Scott and Malcolm Hall pulled out all the stops as they tried to overtake the leading pair. Mark Perrow and Neil Evans looked determined as they kept the leaders in sight. Revered man of the river, Robbie Stewart, carried his new green number with pride. A green number is awarded to a paddler who has successfully completed 10 marathons on the Umkomaas River. Oscar Chalupsky and Mike Tocknell were out of contention, but always a force to be reckoned with. From the helicopter, it appears impossible to pick your way through the rocks of Umkomaas. On their own, Richard Starr and Colin Simpkins left their paddle prints on the flat water. This waterfall is definitely not for shooting in a canoe, although it was done once unintentionally. The thing to do is to take out on the left bank and portage down to the bottom. Picking their way carefully over the tricky rocks, where a fall could cause injury and loss of time. Perrow and Evans, as well as Scott and Hall, welcomed the chance to stretch their legs at the top of the falls. The paddling continued, with no lead change or major upsets, until a 90-degree bend in a gully provided plenty of spectacle. After the gully, it was plain sailing to the finish at the Good Enough Weir on the Natal south coast. Richard Starr and Colin Simpkins were the first to cross over the weir and the finish line 100 meters downstream.
Well, we started this morning together with Scotty, and the Transvaal crew, Mark Perrow and his partner, started off 16 seconds behind. The pace wasn't overly fast, and the Transvaal crew managed to catch up to us fairly quickly. And after that, the three of us worked together passing the back markers. It became quite tricky at times going through rapids with a lot of slower guys in front of you. In about an hour and a half from the start, we came through a rapid, and the Transvaal crew got caught on a rock, and Scotty and Malcolm were just behind them and slewed up behind them. We managed to get past on the left, and shortly after we pulled away, we came up to two of our university paddlers, Steve Stamp and Glenn Hall, and we just asked them to do a few intervals for us to help us get away from Scotty and them, and they helped us over a short while, and they pulled us, and then we turned around and Scotty and them were nowhere to be seen.
After 130 kilometers, this faced the paddlers 100 meters from the end. final results were, first, Richard Starr and Colin Simpkins of Natal University Canoe Club in a time of 9 hours, 1 minute and 1 second, followed by Mark Perrow and Neil Evans of Wits, and third, Tony Scott and Malcolm Hall of Dragon Canoe Club. The singles honours went to Stanley Fryman of Wits in 9 hours, 47 minutes and 3 seconds, followed 2 seconds later by Nico Viljoen, also from Wits, with Herman Chalupsky of Dragon Canoe Club in third position. Hats off to the organisers, headed by Alistair Peters, and all competitors for another excellent event.